So, dear friends, as usual, it's very hearty and warm welcome. Dear friends, in our today's lecture, we are going to learn three different topics. Initially, we shall discuss briefly about the heart transplant, then ECG, electrocardiogram, and finally, we shall discuss about the limbic system. So, let us talk first of all about the heart transplant. Heart transplant may be known as cardiac transplant. Heart transplant may be simply known as cardiac transplant. So, the heart transplant, it is a surgical process performed on the patient with end stage of heart failure or very severe type of coronary artery disease, and in which other medical or surgical treatment have failed. Please try to understand. Those patients, those persons who have end stage of heart failure or those who are suffering through a very severe type of coronary artery disease, and for the survival of such patient there is no any other option, there is no other optional medical or surgical method. Under such condition only the heart transplantation is carried out. Now, during heart transplantation, mostly the working heart, either with or without both lungs of the donor, are implanting into the body of recipient, into the patient's body. Most probably during cardiac transplantation, the patient's heart, recipient's heart, is removed and it is replaced by the donor's heart. Now here the donor is mostly the recently deceased, that is recently brain dead person who acts as the heart donor. I said that most probably the heart of recipient, heart of the patient is removed and it is replaced by the donor's heart. This condition or this type of cardiac transplant procedure is known as orthotopic cardiac transplant. Orthotropic cardiac transplant. But very rarely, less commonly, the recipient's heart is left in parallel fashion to support the donor's heart. This condition is known as heterotopic cardiac transplant. So, simply in this topic, we people have to understand what is heart transplant, what is cardiac transplant, and which are the two different ways of heart transplantation. I am going to talk briefly once again. I said that the heart transplant or cardiac transplant, it's a surgical procedure performed on the patient with end stage heart failure or very severe type of coronary artery disease, and there is no chance of other medical or surgical treatment when other medical or surgical treatment have failed. Also, I said that during cardiac transplantation, the working heart, either with or without both lungs of recently brain dead, recently deceased organ donor, is transplanted into the patient's body. And here are two different ways of cardiac transplantation, such as orthotopic and heterotopic. I said that orthotopic means here the heart of that patient is completely removed, recipient's heart is completely removed, and it is replaced by the donor's heart. While in this another way, heterotopic cardiac transplant, the heart of recipient is left connected in parallel fashion to support the donor's heart. Here is all about the heart transplantation. Now we people have to study the second topic, that is ECG, electrocardiogram. Electrocardiogram may be abbreviated as ECG. First of all, let me tell you the meaning of ECG or electrocardiogram. Actually, electrocardiogram, it is nothing but a permanent record or graphical representation of electric activity occurring during the cardiac cycle in a waveform on a moving graph paper. Please try to understand. I said that the electrocardiogram is nothing but it is the graphical representation. It is the permanent record, permanent graphical ग्राफ, ते ग्राफिकल रिप्रेझेंटेशन म्हणजेच या ठिकाणी इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राम. Here I am going to tell you initially the definition or meaning of this term, what is electrocardiogram. Once again I am going to tell you that electrocardiogram or ECG, it is nothing but a permanent record or graphical representation of electric activity occurring during cardiac cycle in waveform on a moving graph paper. So here I have completely written the definition of electrocardiogram. You can read it once again. That ECG, it is a permanent record or graphical representation of electric activity occurring during cardiac cycle in waveform on a moving graph paper. And the instrument which is used for electrocardiogram, the instrument which is used here to obtain the electrocardiogram is known as electrocardiograph. ज्या इन्स्ट्रुमेंटच्या मदतीने इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राम मिळवला जातो, हे ग्राफिकल रिप्रेझेंटेशन रेकॉर्ड केले जातं, त्या इन्स्ट्रुमेंटला म्हटलं जातं इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राफ. electrocardiogram and the technique of recording of electric activity of heart during its cardiac cycle is known as electrocardiography. Electrocardiography. Actually, this technique of electrocardiography first of all discovered by a scientist, namely Einthoven, in year 1903, and therefore this Einthoven is also regarded as the father of electrocardiography. Father of electrocardiography. Well, now let us talk actually about this technique of electrocardiography. आता प्रत्यक्ष ही इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राफीची टेक्निक काय आहे आणि हा इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राम काय दर्शवतो हे आपल्याला थोडक्यात समजून घ्यायचं आहे. लेट मी एक्सप्लेन यू. लेट अस टॉक नाउ अबाउट the mechanism of electrocardiography. The electric current produced by the heart muscles is picked up by means of electrodes which are placed on the surface of body at different points. Say there are actually 3 different types of electrodes such as arm electrodes, leg electrodes and chest electrodes. Let me write. Arm electrode, leg electrodes and chest electrodes. I said that during electrocardiography, the electric impulse generated by heart muscles is picked up by certain small sized electrodes. That electrodes are placed on the surface of body of that patient at different locations, at different positions. Say that electrodes are placed on the chest, along the left side of chest, then here at the wrist region as well as near the ankle region. And accordingly, the 3 main types of electrodes are there as arm electrodes, leg electrodes and chest electrodes. During electrocardiography, initially a conducting gel is applied in between the skin and this electrode just to pick up the electric signal of a very few millivolt also. Please try to understand. या ठिकाणी मी आता तुम्हाला असं म्हटलं की इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राफी या टेक्निक मध्ये वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारचे इलेक्ट्रोड्स वापरले जातात. हे इलेक्ट्रोड्स त्या पेशंटच्या शरीरावर वेगवेगळ्या ठिकाणी फिक्स केले जातात, तात्पुरते बसवले जातात आणि अर्थातच त्यांच्या पोझिशन नुसार त्यांचे 3 प्रकार पाडलेले आहेत. आर्म, लेग अँड चेस्ट इलेक्ट्रोड्स. सुरुवातीला अतिशय कमी इंटेन्सिटीचा इलेक्ट्रिक इम्पल्स पण शरीरावरून इलेक्ट्रोडला तो पिकअप करता यावा यासाठी शरीरावर वेगवेगळ्या भागांवर conducting jelly लावली जाते. A sticky jelly like material is applied and it facilitates that electrodes to pick up electric signal of very few millivolt also. Now this electric signal picked up by the electrodes is conducted up to the ECG machine. Here at ECG machine, that electric signal is amplified and then that electric signals are recorded on a moving graph paper in the form of wave which is nothing but the electrocardiogram. अर्थात या इलेक्ट्रोड्सने शरीरावरून पिकअप केलेले जे इलेक्ट्रिक सिग्नल्स आहेत ते केबल्सच्या मदतीने प्रत्यक्ष ECG मशीन पर्यंत वाहून नेले जातात. ECG मशीन मध्ये त्या इलेक्ट्रिक सिग्नल्सला एम्प्लिफाय केलं जातं अँड अकॉर्डिंग टू दॅट इलेक्ट्रिक सिग्नल्स त्या विद्युत संवेदनेनुसार त्या ठिकाणी त्या मशीन मध्ये असणाऱ्या इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राफ मशीन मध्ये असणाऱ्या एका मूव्हिंग म्हणजे सतत पुढे सरकणाऱ्या अशा ग्राफ पेपरवर वेव्हच्या स्वरूपात जी काही आकृती रेखाटली जाते, जो ग्राफ रेखाटला जातो, जो आलेख रेखाटला जातो, दॅट इज नथिंग बट ऍक्च्युअली द इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राम. Now we have to talk about that electrocardiogram actually. आता प्रत्यक्ष आपल्याला तो इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राम काय आहे आणि तो काय दर्शवतो हे आपल्याला समजून घ्यायचं आहे. लेट मी टेल यू. द इलेक्ट्रोकार्डिओग्राफ इज प्लॉटेड ॲज टाइम along the x-axis against voltage displacement along the y-axis. Please look at the diagram. Consider here is supposed to be the x-axis and here is supposed to be the y-axis. So I said that the electrocardiogram, this graphical representation of electric activity of heart is recorded by considering time along the x-axis against the voltage displacement along the y-axis. This x-axis is also known as the baseline. X-axis ला baseline पण म्हटलं जातं. Now the typical normal human electrocardiogram shows in all 5 waves or 5 deflections and they are represented by letters P, Q, R, S, T. Let me show in the diagram. Please look here. P, Q, R, S and T. Let me label P, Q, R, S and T. So I said that a typical normal human electrocardiogram shows in all 5 waves, 5 deflections and they are represented as P, Q, R, S, T, of which the P, R and T waves are above the baseline, isn't it? P, R and T, these 3 waves, these 3 deflections are above the baseline and that's why that P, R and T waves are known as positive waves, while the remaining 2, that is Q and S waves are below the baseline, therefore these are known as negative waves. These are known as negative waves. Also, we can consider that out of these 5 waves, the Q, R and S, these are quite sharp waves. These are sharp deflections. You can notice Q wave, R wave and S wave, these are quite sharp, while the P and T, these 2 waves are blunt. Comparatively these are blunt. Now we have to understand what these waves indicate. आपल्याला समजून घ्यायचे की हे डिफ्लेक्शन्स या ECG मधल्या या वेव्स काय इंडिकेट करतात. But before to that, also I would like to tell you that the part of baseline between any 2 waves is known as interval. The part of baseline between any 2 waves is known as interval. Please look at the diagram. You know this x-axis itself indicates the baseline. Now consider here is supposed to be the P wave and here is the Q wave. So definitely we can say the distance of this baseline between the P and Q is nothing but the interval, or the distance between Q wave and S wave, it is the interval between Q and S. Now let us try to understand the meaning of these waves. What these waves indicate? Listen. The P wave represents initiation of electric signal by SA node, sino-auricular node. We all are very well known, which acts as the pacemaker. So this T wave, it indicates the initiation of electric signal by SA node, while the PQ interval, it represents the auricular depolarization and auricular contraction. Auricular depolarization and auricular contraction. Now, what is depolarization? What is repolarization? What is polarization? These concepts we will understand later on. Temporarily, just I want to tell you, whenever an electric signal is initiated, generated by SA node, that electric signal is conducted all over the auricles, all over the auricular muscles, and because of which that auricular muscles get excited. This is simply the auricular depolarization, and it leads to the quick contraction of auricles, that is auricular systole, auricular contraction. Now QRS is known as initial ventricular complex. Initial ventricular complex, of which the QR, this interval represents ventricular depolarization and auricular repolarization. Please try to understand. We all are known, आपण सगळेजण शिकलो आहोत, while studying the conducting system of heart, an electric impulse is generated by SA node. From SA node, that electric impulse is conducted to the AV node, auriculoventricular node, then to the bundle of His, branches of bundle of His, Purkinje fibers, and then to the muscles of ventricles. Now here, this QR interval represents ventricular depolarization. Means what? The electric impulse is conducted via AV node, bundle of His, Purkinje fibers up to each and every muscles of the ventricles. याचा अर्थ ते विद्युत संवेदना आता ऑरिक्युलोवेंट्रिक्युलर नोड पर्यंत पोहोचली, तिथून बंडल ऑफ हिस मार्फत, पर्किंज फायबर्स मार्फत वेंट्रिकलच्या सर्व मसल्स पर्यंत पोहोचते आणि त्यामुळे वेंट्रिकलचे मसल्स हे एक्साइट होतात आणि याला आपण म्हटलंय वेंट्रिक्युलर डिपोलरायझेशन. बट सायमल्टेनियसली इट ऑकर्स द ऑरिक्युलर रिपोलरायझेशन आणि हे घडत असताना ऑरिकल्सचे मसल्स मात्र ओरिजिनल स्थितीला येत असतात, पूर्व अवस्थेला येत असतात आणि त्या ठिकाणी ऑरिकलचं रिलॅक्सेशन सुरू झालेलं असतं. देन द RS and ST interval, try to understand. RS and ST interval, it represents ventricular contraction. Ventricular contraction. या ठिकाणी RS आणि ST हे जे इंटरवल आहेत हे वेंट्रिक्युलर कॉन्ट्रॅक्शन रिप्रेझेंट करत असतात, वेंट्रिक्युलर सिस्टोल रिप्रेझेंट करत असतात, while the T wave it represents the ventricular repolarization and ventricular relaxation. ही जी वेव आहे T wave ही ventricular repolarization, it means the muscles of ventricles again attain its original state, polarized state, and also it occurs the relaxation of ventricles. So briefly here we have understood the meaning of all these different waves. Now what is the significance of these waves? What is the significance of this ECG? Definitely the physicians can understand about different heart diseases, about different heart disorders by the study of these waves or changes in the deflections, or by considering any abnormal change in the interval between two different waves. So it is a primary diagnostic technique to understand different types of cardiac disorders, heart disorders. Okay. Now let us talk about the next topic, that is lymphatic system. Lymphatic system. At the beginning of this topic, circulation, I have already taught you that circulation is nothing but it is the mechanism of transportation of different materials from one part of body to the another part. And also we have seen that in higher animals, in human being, the transportation of different materials, that is circulation, is carried out with the help of certain medium. अर्थात शरीरामध्ये वेगवेगळ्या पदार्थांचं एका ठिकाणाहून दुसऱ्या ठिकाणी वहन करण्यासाठी काही विशिष्ट अशा माध्यमाची आवश्यकता असते. अर्थात प्रमुख माध्यम आहे ब्लड, रक्त. And whenever the transportation of different materials is carried out with the help of blood, it is known as blood circulation, and the system which bring about blood circulation is known as blood vascular system. While there is another important medium, that is lymph. We are going to talk about it. मात्र रक्ताप्रमाणेच आपल्या शरीरामध्ये दुसरं एक द्रव पदार्थ, दुसरं एक मीडियम आहे ज्याला आपण लिम्फ असं म्हणतो, की ज्याच्या मदतीने सुद्धा वेगवेगळ्या पदार्थांचं एका ठिकाणाहून दुसऱ्या ठिकाणी वहन केलं जातं. And therefore that mechanism of transportation of different materials with the help of lymph is known as lymph circulation, and the system which bring about lymph circulation is known as lymph vascular system, or simply known as the lymphatic system. So let us talk about the components of lymphatic system. Lymphatic system consists of four main components. Lymphatic system चे एकूण चार प्रमुख भाग पाडले जातात, such as first lymph, second lymph capillaries, third lymph vessels, and fourth lymph nodes. So now let us try to understand all these components one by one each. First one, lymph. Lymph is usually clear and colorless fluid type of connective tissue, just like the blood. Please try to understand. The lymph, it is clear, colorless fluid type of connective tissue. Clear and colorless fluid type of connective tissue. All of you are known blood is also fluid type of connective tissue. Now what is the difference between blood and lymph? That I am going to explain you here. The lymph, it is formed when interstitial fluid it diffuses into the lymph capillaries. Lymph कशाला म्हणतात हे मी या ठिकाणी तुम्हाला समजून सांगतोय. When interstitial fluid diffuses, enters into the lymph capillaries, then it is said to be the lymph. ज्या वेळेला interstitial fluid हे lymph capillaries मध्ये प्रवाहित होतं, lymph capillaries मध्ये diffuse होतं, त्यावेळेला त्याला interstitial fluid न म्हणता lymph म्हटलं जातं. How is that? Let me explain you. Consider here is supposed to be a group of cells, that is tissue. Just consider. We know that the minor spaces present in between the cells is known as interstitial space. We know that each and every tissue, each and every cell, or each and every tissue receives oxygenated blood by means of artery, arteriole, capillary, and the deoxygenated blood is carried away from the tissue by means of venule, vein, etc. Let me show you. Suppose, consider, here is the tissue, here is a blood vessel, consider artery. We know that artery redivides to form the smaller branches, that is nothing but the arteriole, and arteriole further redivides to form a finest and smallest type of blood vessels, that is nothing but the capillaries. So consider these are supposed to be the blood capillaries. We have already studied that the wall of blood capillaries is very thin, permeable, and it facilitates the exchange of different materials between the blood and interstitial fluid. Now, here these capillaries are formed by the division and redivision of artery or arteriole. That's why we can say this is the arterial end of capillaries. Arterial end of capillaries. Why capillaries reunite and form slightly larger blood vessel known as the venule. We know that many venules come together and form still larger blood vessel, that is vein, by which the deoxygenated blood is carried back towards the heart. हे आपल्या सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे की हृदयापासून हार्ट पासून शुद्ध रक्त हे वेगवेगळ्या टिश्यूज पर्यंत वाहून आणण्याचे काम हे आर्टरीज मार्फत केलं जातं. आर्टरीचं विभाजन होऊन आर्टेरियोल तयार होतात. आर्टेरियोलचं विभाजन होऊन ज्या अतिशय स्मॉलेस्ट अशा प्रकारच्या ब्लड वेसल्स तयार होतात. मराठीत ज्यांना आपण रक्तकेशिका म्हणतो, इंग्लिश मध्ये त्यांना आपण ब्लड कॅपिलरीज म्हणतो. या ब्लड कॅपिलरीज रियुनाइट होऊन जी ब्लड वेसल तयार होते तिला म्हणतात व्हेन्यूल. व्हेन्यूल्स एकत्र येऊन तयार होतात व्हेन, आणि हे अशुद्ध रक्त हृदयाकडे परत वाहून नेत असतात. नाउ आय टोल्ड यू दॅट हियर इज द आर्टेरियल एंड ऑफ कॅपिलरीज बिकॉज हियर please look at the diagram. Arteriole get divided to form the capillaries, and this end is supposed to be the venous end of capillaries. It is called venous end of capillaries because here the capillaries reunite to form the venule. Now, whenever the blood passes through the blood capillaries, try to understand. ज्या वेळेला या ब्लड कॅपिलरीज मधून रक्त प्रवाहित होत असतं, at that time about 9/10 part of that fluid of that blood passes from arterial end of capillaries to the venous end of capillaries. ज्या वेळेला कॅपिलरीज मधून रक्त प्रवाहित होतं त्यावेळेला जवळपास 9/10 part of the blood of the fluid, रक्ताचा 9 भाग हा आर्टेरियल एंड ऑफ कॅपिलरीज पासून व्हेनस एंड ऑफ कॅपिलरीज पर्यंत पोहोचतो. अर्थातच तो इकडून परत व्हेन्यूल आणि वेन मार्फत परत वाहून नेला जाईल. बट अबाउट 1/10 part of the fluid, that is blood, it diffuses out of the blood capillaries and accumulate here in the interstitial spaces. रक्ताचा 1 भाग 1/10 part हा ब्लड कॅपिलरीज मधून डिफ्यूज होतो, बाहेर येतो आणि तो या ठिकाणी इंटरस्टिशियल स्पेसेस मध्ये जमा होतो. अर्थात दिस फ्लुइड which get accumulated here in the interstitial spaces is known as interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid. Now, at the tissue cells, there are not only the blood capillaries, but also there are presence of lymph capillaries. Please look. Here I am going to show. These are supposed to be the lymph capillaries. कल्पना करा या lymph capillaries आहेत, ज्याच्यावर मी परत थोड्या वेळाने बोलणार आहे. Actually, these lymph capillaries are blind at one end. Means these are not continued further. Here its other end is closed. Okay, these lymph capillaries are formed by the division and redivision of a duct or vessel known as lymph vessel. I said that these lymph capillaries are blind at one end, may be called as the lymphatic capillaries. These are slightly broader and more permeable than the blood capillaries. या ज्या lymph capillaries आहेत त्या जास्त permeable आहेत. These are more porous and more permeable than the blood capillaries, and that's why the exchange of materials across these lymph capillaries occurs more easily. Now what happens? Whenever the interstitial fluid accumulates in the interstitial space, ज्या वेळेला या ठिकाणी interstitial fluid या interstitial space मध्ये जमा होतं, ते interstitial fluid it slowly enters into the lymph capillaries. Listen, interstitial fluid, हे जे interstitial fluid आहे हे आता हळूहळू या ठिकाणी या lymph capillaries मध्ये प्रवेश करत असतं, and such interstitial fluid which enters into the lymph capillaries is known as the lymph. याला म्हटलं जातं lymph. I initially told you what is lymph. I told you that the lymph is nothing but it is clear, colorless, fluid type of connective tissue which is accumulated into the lymph capillaries, which is formed when the interstitial fluid enters into the lymph capillaries. Now let me tell you briefly about the composition of this lymph. त्या lymph मध्ये कुठले घटक आहे ते थोडक्यात या ठिकाणी मी मांडतोय. The lymph basically consists of about 96% of water and 4% of different solutes, solid substances. It includes carbohydrates, proteins, fats, amino acids, nitrogenous toxic waste products, as well as it contains the different cells such as lymphocytes, macrophages, monocytes, plasma cells. All these cells play very important role in immunity. Especially you must know that lymphocytes, macrophages, monocytes, these are phagocytic cells. It means they engulf, digest and destroy, kill the bacteria and other foreign germs. याचा अर्थ या lymph मध्ये असणाऱ्या या ज्या वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारच्या पेशी आहेत ते वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारच्या फॉरेन जर्म्सला, रोगकारक जीवजंतूंना नष्ट करत असतात. आणि फरक एवढा आहे, द lymph इज विदाउट आरबीसीज. lymph मध्ये आरबीसीज नसतात, रेड ब्लड सेल्स नसतात, अँड दॅट्स व्हाय द lymph इट अपियर्स कलरलेस, आणि त्यामुळे त्याला कुठल्याही प्रकारचा रंग नसतो. So here I have explained you the first component of lymphatic system, that is lymph. Now let us talk about the second component, that is lymph capillaries. Second component may be known as lymphatic capillaries. These are thin vessels present in all tissue spaces, interwoven with the blood capillaries but not connected to the blood capillaries. Please try to understand the meaning of this sentence. I said that the lymph capillaries are thin blood vessels present in all the tissue spaces, interwoven with the blood capillaries. Interwoven याचा अर्थ ब्लड कॅपिलरीज मध्ये या lymph capillaries जणू काही एकमेकांमध्ये गुंतलेले आहेत, but these are not connected to the blood capillaries. त्या blood capillaries ला connected नसतात. I already told you that these lymph capillaries, here in this diagram I have shown, these lymph capillaries are blind, means these are not continued further, these are blind, closed at other end, distal end, and wall of these lymph capillaries is quite porous and more permeable. Of course, these lymph capillaries reunite to form the lymph vessels. Let us talk about the third component, that is lymphatic vessels. These lymph capillaries are internally lined by endothelial cells, just like the blood capillaries. Now let us move to the third component, that is lymph vessels or lymphatic vessels. So let us talk about the lymph vessels. Just now we have discussed about the lymph capillaries. Now the lymph capillaries unite, lymph capillaries come together and they form slightly larger vessel known as lymph vessel. lymph capillaries एकत्र येऊन थोडीशी मोठी अशी वाहिनी तयार होते, व्हेसल तयार होते, तिला lymph vessel असं म्हणतात. And many lymph vessels come together to form two large lymphatic ducts known as right lymphatic duct and second thoracic duct. Let me explain you here by drawing one diagram. Suppose here is a rough outline diagram of human body. Now many lymph vessels come together and form two large lymphatic ducts. I said right lymphatic duct. Let me show. It runs along the right side. Here is supposed to be the right lymphatic duct. And another major thoracic duct. These two large lymphatic ducts, they carry lymph and pour into the subclavian vein. Please try to understand. या ज्या दोन lymphatic vessels आहेत, या lymph वरच्या दिशेने वाहून नेतात आणि या lymphatic duct subclavian vein मध्ये उघडतात. You know vein, blood vessel, म्हणजे हा lymph परत रक्तामध्ये आणून टाकला जातो. Let me show. Suppose this right lymphatic duct, it opens into the blood vessel known as right subclavian vein, and thoracic duct open into left subclavian vein. It means we have to understand that this lymph is again poured into the blood. हे lymph परत रक्तामध्ये आणून टाकलं जातं. One more thing I would like to tell you, that the lymph vessel which collect lymph from intestine appears quite milky because it contains large quantity of absorbed fats from the digested food. अन्नामध्ये पचलेलं जे काही फॅट्स आहेत, फॅटी मटेरियल आहे, ते रक्तामध्ये शोषलं जात नाही because of its high molecular weight, and that's why that digested fat is absorbed into the lymph. Okay, and the lymph vessel which carries such lymph containing large quantity of fat appears milky, and such type of lymph vessels which appear milky because of fats are known as lacteals. Here lacteal, this word stands for milk or milky nature. So here I told you about the lymph vessels. Now come to the fourth and last component of lymphatic system, that is lymph nodes, may be known as lymphatic nodes or lymph glands. Lymph nodes or lymph glands, these are small and bean-shaped bodies present along the course of lymph vessels. Of course, these lymph glands, lymph nodes, I said these are small and bean shaped bodies. चवडीच्या आकाराच्या लहान लहान ह्या ज्या बॉडीज आहेत ज्यांना lymph nodes म्हटलं जातं ते lymph vesselsच्या मार्गावर असंख्य ठिकाणी प्रेझेंट असतात. The lymph nodes are scattered throughout the body, but mostly these are large in number in the neck region, these are large in number in the axilla, in the elbow region, also in the groin region and in the knee region. Now this each lymph node receives two lymph vessels. प्रत्येक lymph node अशा प्रकारे दोन lymph vessels receive करत असतो. These are called as afferent lymph vessels, while either one or two lymph vessels leave the lymph node known as efferent lymph vessels. We know that these lymph vessels carry the lymph containing so many different substances. Now what is the role of lymph node? या lymph nodeचं कार्य काय? In the lymph node it occurs the filtration of lymph. या ठिकाणी जणू ते lymph हे फिल्टर केलं जातं. The excess of water and minerals are removed from the lymph while proteins and lipids are retained. त्या lymph मध्ये असलेलं अतिरिक्त पाणी आणि इलेक्ट्रोलाइट्स हे तिथून वेगळे केले जातात, मात्र त्या lymph मध्ये असलेले प्रोटीन्स आणि लिपिड्स हे lymph मध्ये तसेच ठेवले जात असतात. Also the lymph nodes are known as defense barriers because lymph nodes contain so many different types of phagocytic cells, lymphocytes, and which are responsible to kill, to digest, to destroy the foreign germs, bacteria, etc., etc. And that's why, as far as concerned with our immune system, that lymph nodes play very important role. So here briefly I told you about the four different components of lymphatic system, such as lymph, second lymph capillaries, third lymph vessels, and fourth that is lymph nodes. So here ends this topic. Let us stop here today. Thank you. Bye.